My name is Sherry. I just turned 62 last month. Standing outside my daughter Amanda's wedding venue in my carefully chosen navy blue dress, I never imagined security would block my entrance. The elegant invitation with gold lettering still tucked in my purse had my name beautifully printed on it. The same invitation for an event I had written checks totaling $45,000 to fund. Yet here I stood being told I was not welcome at my only daughter's wedding. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe to hear what I did next. Amanda was my only child, my beautiful daughter who had just turned 32. Looking at her always filled me with pride. She had my hazel eyes and her father's confident smile, a striking combination that turned heads whenever she entered a room. Growing up, we had been inseparable. I still remember our Saturday morning traditions, making blueberry pancakes together while dancing to old records in our pajamas. She would stand on a kitchen stool, her little hands covered in flour, giggling as I twirled her around between flipping pancakes. Our bond had been forged through both joy and tragedy. When Amanda was just 10 years old, my husband Jack was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer. Despite never having smoked a day in his life, the disease took him from us in less than 6 months. I still remember holding Amanda as she sobbed at his funeral, promising her that somehow we would be okay. That night I made a silent vow to Jack that I would give our daughter everything we had dreamed for her, no matter what sacrifices I had to make. And sacrifices there were. I took on extra shifts at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, often working 16-hour days to make ends meet. When Amanda showed promise in violin, I found a way to pay for lessons. When she needed braces, I picked up weekend shifts. College was the biggest hurdle, but between my savings, a second mortgage on our modest home, and student loans, we managed to get her through a prestigious university with a degree in marketing. She was the first in our family to graduate college, and watching her walk across that stage in her cap and gown made every late night and tight budget worthwhile. Through those years, Amanda would often say, "Mom, when I make it big, I'm going to buy you a house by the beach." We would laugh together, dreaming of a future where financial struggles were behind us. Even as a young adult, Amanda would call me almost daily, sharing details about job interviews, apartment hunting, and later her career advancement at a well-known advertising agency. Everything began to change 3 years ago when Amanda met Thomas. She brought him to our traditional Sunday dinner, and I could immediately see why she was attracted to him. Tall, with perfectly styled dark hair and an expensive watch glinting on his wrist, Thomas had the kind of confidence that came from a privileged upbringing. He was charming, complimenting my home cooking and asking thoughtful questions about family photos. But something about the way he subtly guided Amanda's conversations, occasionally speaking over her, or correcting small details of her stories, left me with an uneasy feeling I couldn't quite place. Over the following months, I noticed gradual changes in Amanda. Our daily calls became weekly, then occasional. She began canceling our standing Sunday dinners, citing work commitments or events with Thomas's friends. When she did visit, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone. Her clothing style changed, becoming more expensive and trendy. Once when I complimented a designer dress she wore, she casually mentioned that Thomas had helped her develop better taste. 6 months ago, Amanda and Thomas announced their engagement over dinner at an upscale restaurant he had selected. I was genuinely happy for her happiness, pushing aside my reservations about how quickly their relationship had progressed. Thomas ordered champagne, and as we toasted their future, Amanda excitedly began discussing wedding plans. It was then that Thomas smoothly mentioned his parents would be too busy with commitments to their charitable foundation to assist with wedding planning or finances. "But they're really looking forward to welcoming Amanda into the family," he added, squeezing her hand. I later learned that despite Thomas's talk of his family's connections and wealth, they had flatly refused to contribute a single dollar to the wedding. A week later, Amanda and Thomas invited me to coffee. With synchronized precision, they presented a folder containing pictures of a luxury resort venue, elaborate floral arrangements, and a guest list of over 200 people, many of whom I had never heard mentioned before. "Mom, we've calculated everything, and it comes to about $45,000, Amanda said, sliding a detailed budget across the table. "We know it's a lot, but this is my only wedding, and Thomas's business associates expect a certain standard." I stared at the number, mentally calculating how it would impact my retirement plans. I had always imagined helping with Amanda's wedding, but this figure represented nearly half of my carefully saved retirement fund. Still, the hopeful look in my daughter's eyes took me back to all those moments I'd promised myself I would give her everything I could. "Of course, sweetie. I want your day to be perfect," I heard myself say. What followed was a whirlwind of venue visits and vendor meetings. Initially, Amanda invited me to join them in looking at venues. I took a day off work excited to be part of this special process, only to receive a text an hour before our meeting. Thomas and I decided to go earlier. "Found the perfect place, we'll send pics." Later that week, I received an email from the venue requiring a $7,000 deposit with instructions to make the checkout directly to the resort. As planning progressed, I noticed Amanda becoming increasingly critical of my input. When I suggested a local bakery known for delicious wedding cakes at reasonable prices, she rolled her eyes. "Mom, nobody uses small-town bakeries anymore. We need a cake designer who understands modern aesthetics." The cake she chose cost $1,200 more than my suggestion. Thomas's parents hosted a dinner at their sprawling suburban home, ostensibly to welcome me to their family. Their house was impressive with marble floors and original artwork on every wall. Throughout the evening, his mother, Cynthia, made subtle comments about my quaint nursing career and how fortunate Amanda was to be moving up in the world. Thomas's father barely acknowledged me except to inquire whether the wedding payments were on track. I left feeling distinctly unwelcome in what should have been a new extended family. Meanwhile, my relationship with Amanda continued to deteriorate. When she canceled our planned mother-daughter dress shopping appointment with a casual text claiming she was swamped with work, I was disappointed but understanding. 2 days later, I saw photos on her Instagram of her and Cynthia at an exclusive bridal boutique, champagne flutes in hand, as Amanda modeled various gowns. When I called to express my hurt feelings, Amanda dismissed me. "You're being so dramatic, Mom. Cynthia just happened to be free when I got a last-minute appointment. It's not like we planned to exclude you." I swallowed my hurt and congratulated her on finding a beautiful dress. With Amanda increasingly distant, I found myself meeting alone with Judith, the wedding planner. She was professional but warm, sometimes shooting me sympathetic glances when discussing the mounting costs. During one such meeting, I discovered Amanda had upgraded several elements without discussing the additional expenses. "The Swarovski crystal centerpieces are stunning," Judith commented, reviewing her notes. "They'll add $8,000 to the floral budget, but Amanda assured me you had approved the change." I hadn't even heard about crystal centerpieces. When I later tried to discuss budget concerns with Amanda, she became tearful. "I thought you wanted me to have my dream wedding," she said, her voice breaking. "If money is too tight, I guess we can cut corners, though. Thomas's family will definitely notice." Feeling guilty and not wanting to disappoint her, I agreed to the additional expenses, stretching my budget even thinner. After all, I reasoned this was a once-in-a-lifetime event for my only daughter. What was money compared to her happiness? As the wedding date approached, I noticed a pattern forming that I couldn't ignore. Traditional mother-of-the-bride events were happening without me. I first realized something was wrong when my longtime friend Susan called to ask what I planned to wear to Amanda's bridal shower. "What bridal shower?" I asked, my stomach sinking. There was an awkward pause on the line before Susan stammered, "Oh, I thought you knew. It's this Saturday at the Windsor Hotel. I received an invitation last week." Fighting back tears, I assured Susan there must have been a mix-up with the invitations. As soon as we hung up, I called Amanda, trying to keep my voice steady as I inquired about the shower. "Oh, it must have been an oversight," Amanda said, her tone dismissive. "The invitations were handled by Thomas's assistant. Anyway, it's just a small gathering of close friends." I accepted her explanation, choosing to believe it was truly an innocent mistake. But later that evening, while browsing social media, I stumbled across photos posted by one of Amanda's bridesmaids. The small gathering appeared to be an elaborate affair with custom decorations, a champagne fountain, and at least 40 guests. In several photos, Cynthia stood proudly next to Amanda, both wearing matching mother and bride-to-be sashes. My heart cracked seeing Cynthia in what should have been my place, but I told myself not to be petty. This was about Amanda's happiness, not my feelings. A week after the shower, Amanda called with a request that made my already strained budget stretch even further. "Mom, Thomas and I were thinking about our honeymoon," she began, her voice taking on the persuasive tone I'd come to recognize. "The resort in Bali is offering a special suite with a private pool, but it's a bit more than we budgeted. Could you help with the difference? It's only $4,000 more." I was silent for a moment, calculating what remained of my savings after covering the ever-increasing wedding costs. I would need to cash in one of my remaining certificates of deposit, accepting the early withdrawal penalty. "I'll make it work," I finally said, because what else could I say? She was my daughter, and I had spent a lifetime putting her needs first. The rehearsal dinner, traditionally hosted by the groom's family, was held at an exclusive country club. Thomas's parents had reluctantly agreed to cover this expense after I had committed to the entire wedding. I arrived early, nervous, but excited for this milestone event. As I was admiring the elegant table settings, I overheard Amanda's voice from behind a decorative screen where the bridal party was gathering. "My mom's dress is so outdated," she was saying, followed by muffled laughter. "I tried to get her to buy something decent, but she has no sense of style. Just wait until you see her tomorrow." I froze, my cheeks burning with humiliation. I had spent weeks searching for a dress I thought was elegant and appropriate, even splurging on accessories I couldn't really afford. Hearing my daughter mock me to her friends felt like a physical blow. During the dinner, Thomas stood to give a toast. After thanking his parents for their generous contribution to the celebration, "The rehearsal dinner only," he added. "And to Sherry, who? Well, Amanda wouldn't be here without you." The dismissive laughter that followed made it clear I was the punchline, rather than an honored parent. Later, as guests mingled, Cynthia approached me with a glass of wine and a concerned expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Sherry dear, I noticed your outfit for tomorrow when Amanda showed me the photos from your fitting," she said, her voice honeyed with false concern. "I'm worried it might clash with our family photos. Have you considered something more subdued?" I had already purchased a carefully selected navy blue dress that had stretched my credit card to its limit. Amanda had seen it and expressed no concerns. Now, the night before the wedding, I was being told it was inappropriate. "What exactly is wrong with my dress?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's just a bit attention-seeking for someone in your position," Cynthia replied with a tight smile. "Navy is so close to black, which is traditionally inappropriate, and the beading might catch the light in photos. Rather than cause a scene or risk disappointing Amanda, I spent the remainder of the night calling department stores to find something available for early morning pickup. I found a simple, expensive mauve dress that I didn't particularly like, but would hopefully meet with Cynthia's approval. It cost $700. I didn't have forcing me to use a credit card. I had promised myself would be for emergencies only. When I finally located my seat at the rehearsal dinner, I discovered I had been placed at the furthest table from the bridal party, seated with distant acquaintances and Amanda's colleagues I had never met. Thomas's extended family filled the tables closest to the bride and groom, while I sat with virtual strangers attempting to maintain a brave face. That night alone in my hotel room, I finally allowed myself to cry. The tears came silently at first, then in body-shaking sobs that left me gasping for breath. I had given everything for Amanda, financial and emotional, yet somehow found myself pushed further and further from her life. Still, I wiped away my tears and reapplied my makeup for pre-wedding photos, determined to support my daughter on her special day. Whatever tension existed between us, I was certain we could address it after the wedding. The next morning, I made the final payment to the wedding venue, transferring the remaining balance of $17,000 to complete my financial obligation. The transaction confirmation pinged on my phone as I finished preparing for the day, a reminder of both my love for Amanda and the steep cost it had entailed. The morning of Amanda's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June day that seemed to promise new beginnings. I had barely slept, partly from the emotional toll of the previous evening, and partly from excitement for my daughter's big day. Despite everything, I was determined to make this a positive experience. I carefully applied my makeup to hide the puffiness around my eyes, styled my hair in soft waves, and slipped into the new mauve dress that had cost far more than I could afford. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but as mother of the bride, I planned to arrive by 11 to help with any last-minute preparations. I had texted Amanda the night before to confirm the time, receiving only a brief "whatever works" in response. Still, I remained optimistic that today would heal the growing rift between us. When I pulled into the resort's circular driveway, I noticed several luxury cars already parked near the entrance. Inside the lobby, I could hear laughter and conversation coming from the direction of the bridal suite. Following the sound, I spotted Thomas's parents and several relatives I recognized from the rehearsal dinner, all dressed and seemingly involved in the preparations. Smiling and nodding to them, I approached the ornate double doors leading to the preparation area. A young man in a dark suit with an earpiece stopped me with a polite but firm hand gesture. "Good morning, ma'am. May I see your name on the access list?" "I'm Sherry Williams, mother of the bride," I explained, assuming this was a simple security measure for the expensive venue. The young man scanned his tablet, flipping through several screens before looking up with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Miss Williams, but your name isn't on the approved access list for the bridal preparation area." "There must be some mistake," I said, my smile faltering. "I'm Amanda's mother." "I understand, ma'am, but I can only admit people who are on this list," he explained, turning the tablet to show me a spreadsheet of names. Mine was noticeably absent. Confused but not yet alarmed, I pulled out my phone to call Amanda. The call went straight to voicemail. I sent a text explaining the situation, expecting a quick response clearing up the misunderstanding. 5 minutes passed with no reply. As I waited, Cynthia emerged from the bridal suite immaculately dressed in a designer gown with her hair and makeup flawlessly done. When she spotted me standing near the security guard, a flash of something like satisfaction crossed her face before she composed her features into a mask of polite concern. "Sherry, is something wrong?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. My name isn't on the list to enter the bridal area," I explained, expecting her to help resolve the issue. Cynthia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes turned cold. "Oh, I don't believe that's a misunderstanding. Amanda and Thomas were quite specific about who should be present during preparations. Perhaps you should check your invitation for the general guest arrival time. I believe it's 1:30. Her words hit me like a physical blow. "But I'm her mother. I should be helping her get ready." "Amanda has all the help she needs," Cynthia replied, gesturing to the room behind her where I could glimpse bridesmaids and what appeared to be a professional styling team. "She mentioned you two haven't been seeing eye to eye lately. She thought it would be less stressful for everyone this way." I stood speechless, my chest tight with hurt and confusion. Cynthia gave me a smile that never reached her eyes before turning to the security guard. "Please ensure Miss Williams understands the arrival protocol. We wouldn't want any disruptions to Amanda's special day." With that, she swept back into the bridal suite, the door closing firmly behind her. Still in shock, I approached Judith, the wedding planner, who was crossing the lobby with an armful of floral arrangements. Judith the first called, hurrying toward her. "There's been some confusion about access to the bridal suite." Judith's normally friendly face looked uncomfortable as she spotted me. "Sherry, I was just coming to find you," she said, her voice lowered. "I think there's been a change in plans regarding your role today." "What change?" "I'm the mother of the bride," I said, my voice cracking slightly. Judith glanced around nervously before pulling me into a quiet corner. "I'm just following instructions," she whispered. "Amanda and Thomas revised the day of protocols last night. I'm so sorry, but they've requested that you remain with the general guests." But I paid for everything I said, disbelief evident in my voice. The venue, the flowers, the food, everything. How can I be excluded from my own daughter's preparations? Judith looked genuinely sympathetic but firm. "I understand, and I personally think it's inappropriate, but I have to follow my client's instructions. The revised plan states you should arrive with general guests and be seated according to the seating chart." I thanked Judith for her honesty and retreated to a bench in the lobby, trying to process what was happening. I sent another text to Amanda, this one more direct: "Sweetheart, I'm being kept out of the bridal suite. Please let security know I should be allowed in." 20 minutes passed with no response. I decided to walk around the venue grounds to clear my head, eventually finding myself near a side window that offered a view into the bridal suite. Through the glass, I could see Amanda in her wedding gown, looking more beautiful than I had ever seen her. She was laughing as Cynthia adjusted her veil, surrounded by bridesmaids and stylists. The scene was picture perfect, except for my absence from it. As I watched, Amanda checked her phone, her expression changing, as she presumably saw my messages. Rather than looking concerned, she showed the screen to Cynthia, and both women shook their heads. Amanda typed something quickly before returning to her preparations, seemingly unbothered by the fact that her mother was standing outside, excluded from this milestone moment. My phone pinged with a message from Amanda. "Things are just easier this way. We can talk tomorrow. Please don't make a scene." The casual cruelty of the message staggered me. After everything I had sacrificed, after emptying my retirement accounts and extending myself financially in ways that would take years to recover from, I was being treated as an inconvenience to be managed rather than an essential participant in my only child's wedding. I returned to my car, unable to bear standing awkwardly in the lobby any longer. Sitting behind the wheel, I finally allowed the tears to fall freely. The beautiful day I had imagined helping my daughter into her dress, sharing wisdom and love before she took this significant life step, had been stripped away. In its place was a humiliation so profound I could barely breathe through it. As the minutes ticked by and the general guests began to arrive, I faced a devastating realization: this exclusion from the preparation was likely just the beginning. What role, if any, would I be permitted to play in the ceremony itself? Would I be seated in the back, a stranger at my own daughter's wedding? The thought was unbearable. Wiping my tears, I reached for my purse to find a tissue. As I did, my fingers brushed against the folder containing all the financial receipts for the wedding, which I had organized meticulously over the months of planning. Every check I had written, every credit card statement, every contract I had signed as the financially responsible party, including the final venue payment I had made just that morning, which had cleared my account but likely hadn't yet been processed by the resort's accounting department. As I sat in my car, clutching the folder of receipts, a strange calm began to replace my anguish. I spread the documents across the passenger seat, examining each one with new eyes. Every service, every beautiful detail that would make Amanda's day perfect had been contracted and paid for by me. My signature appeared on every dotted line. My credit card numbers and bank account information filled every payment form. The final venue payment of $17,000 had been scheduled for processing today. According to the receipt I held in my trembling hands, it was still pending in the system. A thought began to form, terrible and tempting all at once. I had raised Amanda to be kind and considerate. I had modeled selflessness and sacrifice. Somewhere along the way, perhaps through my own enabling, she had learned instead that she could take without giving, hurt without consequences. As I considered what was happening inside the venue where my daughter and her future husband were celebrating, with people who had contributed nothing while excluding the person who had given everything, something hardened within me. With surprisingly steady hands, I called my credit card company. "Hello, this is Sherry Williams. I need to report a pending transaction that I wish to cancel," I said when a representative answered. "Certainly, Miss Williams. Can you verify the transaction details?" I provided the information for the final venue payment, explaining that I wished to stop the payment before it was fully processed. "May I ask the reason for the cancellation?" the representative inquired. "The services contracted will not be provided as agreed," I replied, which was true in a way they couldn't understand. I had agreed to pay for a wedding where I would participate as mother of the bride, not as an unwelcome observer. After a brief hold, the representative returned. "I've placed a hold on that transaction, Miss Williams. It won't be processed. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No, that's all. Thank you for your assistance." The next call I made was to Carlton, the venue manager I had worked with over the previous months. He answered on the second ring, his voice professionally pleasant. "Carlton, this is Sherry Williams." "Amanda Taylor's mother," I began, keeping my voice steady. "I'm outside the venue now, and we seem to have a situation." "What can I help you with, Miss Williams?" he asked. "I've just been informed that despite paying for the entire wedding, I'm not permitted to participate in the preparation or potentially the ceremony itself," I explained. "I've been designated as a general guest, if that." There was a pause before Carlton responded, his tone more personal than professional. "I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Williams. That's highly unusual and frankly inappropriate. Would you like me to speak with the bride?" "Actually, there's something else you should know," I continued. "I've just placed a stop payment on the final venue balance that was pending processing this morning." "I see," Carlton said, his voice shifting to concern. "That payment is required for today's services to proceed as planned." "I understand. I should also mention that I've been told by the wedding planner that Amanda and Thomas informed security I might cause a scene. Carlton, I've worked with you for months arranging every detail of this event. Have I ever been anything but reasonable and cooperative? No, Miss Williams. You've been a pleasure to work with, he admitted. Much more so than some other parties involved, if I may speak candidly. I appreciate that. Would you be willing to meet me at my car? I'm in the north parking area, Silver Camry. I'd like to show you the contracts and receipts. 10 minutes later, Carlton was reviewing my documentation, his expression growing increasingly troubled. These contracts are all in your name, he observed. You're the contracting party, not Amanda or Thomas. Yes. They haven't contributed $1 to any of this, I confirmed. I've paid nearly $45,000 to date, with the final $17,000 still pending. Carlton looked up from the papers, meeting my eyes. Miss Williams, as the contracting party, you have certain rights regarding these services. If you're being excluded from your daughter's wedding that you've fully funded, that's beyond unprofessional on their part. It's cruel. What are my options, Carlton? I asked quietly. He considered for a moment before responding. Legally, as the person who contracted and paid for these services, you have the right to modify or cancel them. The vendors are contracted to you, not to Amanda and Thomas. A plan began to form in my mind. I need to make some calls, I said. Could you stay with me for a few minutes? I may need your assistance verifying my identity with some of the vendors. For the next 30 minutes, I systematically contacted every service provider for the wedding, the florist who had created elaborate arrangements costing thousands, the caterer preparing a gourmet meal for 200 guests, the DJ with his premium package, the photographer and videographer team, the bartending service with top-shelf liquor. With each call, I calmly explained the situation and requested cancellation of services, or at minimum a significant scaling back. Some vendors were initially reluctant, but when Carlton confirmed I was indeed the contracting and paying party, and when I explained that I, the mother of the bride, was being forcibly excluded from the event I had funded, they became more understanding. Many expressed shock and sympathy. A few even shared similar stories of clients who had treated parents or other financial contributors poorly. By 1 o'clock, just an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I had effectively dismantled most of the wedding I had spent months planning and paying for. The florist had agreed to remove all arrangements except the bare minimum required by contract. The caterer had scaled back to a simple buffet rather than the 5-course served dinner. The DJ had canceled, citing a contract clause about client misconduct. The premium bar service had been replaced with a basic package. The photographer had agreed to provide only ceremony coverage, not the all-day documentation originally planned. As I made these calls, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions. Part of me felt terrible about disrupting Amanda's wedding day, but a stronger part recognized that this was perhaps the first time in our relationship that I had established a boundary with real consequences. I had spent a lifetime teaching Amanda through my actions that she could treat me poorly without repercussions. Today, that pattern would end. From my parking spot, I could see vendors beginning to arrive at the service entrance, then leaving with confused expressions. Staff members were rushing back and forth, clearly trying to manage an escalating crisis. My phone began ringing with calls from Amanda, Thomas, and even Cynthia, all of which I declined to answer. They had made their position clear earlier. Now I was making mine clear in return. I watched as Carlton was summoned inside, presumably to explain the sudden changes. Through it all, I remained in my car, a strange sense of peace settling over me. For perhaps the first time since Amanda had announced her engagement, I felt in control of my own role in this situation. At 1:40, 20 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, I saw Amanda burst through the side door of the venue in her wedding dress, her face contorted with anger as she scanned the parking lot. When she spotted my car, she began marching toward me, veil flying behind her and makeup streaked with tears. Behind her, Thomas followed with his parents, all looking equally furious. I took a deep breath and stepped out of my car to face my daughter and the consequences of my actions. Amanda reached my car first, her beautiful wedding gown gathering dust from the parking lot as she stormed toward me. "What have you done?" she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. "Everything is falling apart in there. The flowers are gone, the caterer is serving cheap buffet food, the DJ just left with all his equipment." I remained calm, meeting her gaze steadily. "I've adjusted the services to reflect my current level of involvement in your wedding." Thomas caught up to us, his face flushed with anger. This is sabotage. We have 200 guests arriving right now to a disaster zone. You've ruined everything. Interesting perspective, I replied, my voice even. I was told earlier that my presence would ruin Amanda's special day. Now you're suggesting my absence from certain services has ruined it. Which is it? Cynthia stepped forward, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at me accusingly. This is exactly why Amanda didn't want you involved today. You're unstable and vindictive. Actually, I countered, opening my folder of receipts. I'm simply exercising my rights as the contracting party for all these services. Services I agreed to provide when I believed I would be participating as the mother of the bride, not excluded like an unwanted acquaintance. Thomas's father, who had barely spoken 2 words to me during the entire engagement, suddenly found his voice. This is outrageous. We'll sue you for breach of contract. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. Please review the contracts, I said, handing the folder to Thomas. Every signature is mine. Every payment came from my accounts. I'm the client, not you, not Amanda, not Thomas. I have documentation of Amanda's text explicitly excluding me from her preparations and warning me not to make a scene. I have witnesses who can testify that I was prevented from entering the bridal suite despite being the mother of the bride and the person who paid for everything. Amanda's fury seemed to falter as she glanced at the contracts Thomas was frantically flipping through. You can't do this, she said, but her voice held less conviction. It's my wedding day. Yes, it is your wedding day, I agreed. A day you chose to exclude your mother from, despite accepting $45,000 from me to fund it. A day you allowed your future mother-in-law to take my place while I was relegated to the status of a distant relative. Tell me, Amanda, what kind of person does that? We just thought it would be less complicated without you hovering and trying to control everything, Amanda said defensively. Hovering? I wasn't even allowed in the room, I replied. And as for controlling things, I simply paid the bills you presented to me without question. Bills your future in-laws refused to contribute to despite their supposed wealth and status. Thomas's parents exchanged uncomfortable glances at this direct reference to their financial non-contribution. So what happens now? Thomas demanded. Are you going to hold our wedding hostage? No, I said firmly. The ceremony can proceed with the scaled-back services I've arranged. Or you can cancel entirely and deal with informing your guests. Or I paused, looking directly at Thomas's parents. You can step up and pay for the premium services to be reinstated. I understand many of the vendors are still on site or nearby willing to return if payment is guaranteed. Carlton has their contact information. Cynthia scoffed. This is emotional blackmail. You're trying to force your way back into the wedding. No, I corrected her. I'm simply no longer funding an event I'm not welcome at. It's a boundary, something I should have established long ago. Amanda's anger seemed to be giving way to panic as she realized the full implications of what was happening. Mom, please, she begged, her tone shifting dramatically. We can fix this. You can come into the bridal suite right now. We'll take pictures together. Just please call the vendors back. I shook my head slowly. Amanda, this isn't about the bridal suite anymore. This is about years of me giving everything while you take without appreciation or respect. This is about you and Thomas planning to exclude me from your wedding day while happily accepting my money to fund it. That's not true, Amanda protested weakly. Isn't it? Tell me, what was the plan after today? Were you intending to maintain a close relationship with me, or was I going to be gradually phased out of your life once you had extracted everything useful from me? The flash of guilt across Amanda's face told me everything I needed to know. It was exactly as I had suspected. You see, while making those vendor calls, I had some interesting conversations, I continued. Several mentioned comments you'd made about me during your planning meetings. The photographer in particular recalled you saying you were only inviting your mother because she was paying. The florist remembered you and Thomas joking about how you'd be free of obligations after the purveyor of, wedding. Thomas stepped forward aggressively. You had no right to cancel anything. My parents' friends are here, business associates who are crucial to my career. Then perhaps your parents should have contributed financially, I replied simply. I'm a nurse who emptied her retirement accounts to give Amanda a beautiful day only to be treated like an embarrassing obligation. What's your excuse? Thomas turned to his parents. Can you fix this? We need the premium services back immediately. His father shook his head. We're not paying for last-minute vendor extortion. This is ridiculous. I closed my folder and returned it to my purse. Then it seems we're at an impasse. The wedding can proceed with the basic services currently in place, or it can be canceled. That decision is yours to make now. Amanda's makeup was completely ruined by her tears, her carefully styled hair coming loose. You've destroyed everything, she sobbed. How could you do this to me? For a moment my resolve wavered. This was still my daughter, the little girl I had raised alone, the center of my world for so many years. But then I remembered her laughter as she mocked my dress to her bridesmaids, her casual dismissal of my hurt feelings, her willingness to let me pay for everything while planning to exclude me from her life. I didn't destroy anything, Amanda, I said gently. I simply stopped enabling behavior that was destroying me. The choice about what happens next is yours. I'll be going home now. If you decide you want a relationship based on mutual respect in the future, my door will be open. But things will be different. As I got into my car, I caught a glimpse of Thomas already walking away from Amanda, phone to his ear, apparently more concerned with damage control for his business contacts than supporting his bride. Cynthia and her husband were heading back to the venue, leaving Amanda standing alone in the parking lot in her wedding dress. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done to drive away from my daughter in that moment. But sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is allow their child to experience the natural consequences of their actions. The scene at my home 3 hours later was chaotic. I had barely settled in, still wearing the mauve dress I'd purchased for the wedding, when the doorbell rang repeatedly, followed by angry pounding. Through the peephole, I could see Amanda still in her wedding dress, though now noticeably disheveled, with Thomas beside her, looking equally furious. I opened the door calmly, stepping aside as they burst into my living room. "How could you, Amanda?" screamed mascara streaking her cheeks. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The wedding was a disaster." Half the guests left when they saw the cheap buffet replacing the gourmet dinner they were promised. There was no music during the reception because the DJ never came back. Thomas's father's business partners were humiliated. "I'm sorry it was disappointing," I said, meaning it despite everything. "That wasn't my intention." Thomas stepped forward, his face inches from mine. "Disappointing. It was catastrophic. My career could be damaged by this. We're consulting with attorneys first thing tomorrow. You breached contracts and acted with malicious intent to sabotage our wedding." "Actually," I replied, maintaining my composure, "I've already consulted with an attorney. Every contract was between me and the vendors, not you. As the client, I had the right to modify services, especially given the circumstances. But please feel free to pursue legal action if you believe you have a case." This was a bluff, but they didn't need to know that. In truth, I had simply read the contracts carefully before making my calls to vendors. "We told the guests there was a mix-up with the venue," Amanda said, collapsing onto my sofa. "We had to lie to cover for your vindictive behavior." "Just as you lied to me about wanting me involved in your wedding," I asked quietly. "Or lied to the security staff about me potentially causing a scene." Thomas paced the room, checking his phone periodically. "This isn't about you, Sherry. This was our wedding day, and you deliberately ruined it because your feelings were hurt. It's pathetic and selfish." I took a deep breath, refusing to be baited into an emotional response. "I'd like to understand something, Thomas. When exactly did you and Amanda decide I shouldn't be part of the wedding preparations? Was it always the plan, or did it develop over time?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He exchanged a glance with Amanda before answering. "It doesn't matter. It was our decision to make." "Actually, I think it does matter," I persisted. "Especially since texts between you and Amanda that the wedding planner accidentally forwarded to me last week suggest you had planned this exclusion for months while still accepting my money." This was another bluff, but judging by their expressions, it had hit remarkably close to the truth. "You went through our private messages," Amanda gasped indignation, momentarily overriding her distress. "No, but your reaction just confirmed what I suspected," I replied calmly. "You and Thomas planned to take my money and then cut me out, not just from the wedding, but from your lives afterward." Thomas's phone rang, and he stepped into the kitchen to answer it, speaking in hushed but clearly agitated tones. Amanda's anger seemed to deflate slightly in his absence. It wasn't like that she said, though, her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "We just thought things would be easier with some distance." Easier for whom I asked. Certainly not for me after emptying my retirement accounts to fund your wedding. Tell me, Amanda, what was the long-term plan holiday visits out of obligation? Occasional phone calls? Or were you planning to disappear into Thomas's world entirely? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Thomas returned from the kitchen, his expression grim. My parents are refusing to help fix this mess. They said we made our bed by relying on your money, and now we have to lie in it. How surprising that they won't contribute financially, I remarked. It seems to be a pattern. This isn't funny, Thomas snapped. Do you have any idea how humiliating today was? We had to return wedding gifts because guests left early. The photographer only captured the ceremony, none of the reception. The wedding video will be a record of embarrassment. We can never show anyone. I notice your concerns are centered around appearances and impressions, not the actual meaning of your marriage vows, I observed. Is that what's most important to you, Thomas? How things look rather than what they are? He turned to Amanda. I can't deal with her right now. We need to go. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in Amanda's eyes as she looked between Thomas and me. What about tomorrow? The honeymoon flights are booked. We're obviously not going on the honeymoon now, Thomas said dismissively. I have damage control to do with my father's associates. Besides, half the honeymoon was being paid for by your mother, wasn't it? Another funding source that's disappeared. The casual cruelty of his tone as he referred to me as a funding source, rather than Amanda's mother, seemed to penetrate even Amanda's self-absorption. She looked at him with new eyes, perhaps seeing clearly, for the first time, the man she had just married. But we've been planning this trip for months, she said, her voice small. Plans change, he replied coldly. My career has to come first right now. Your mother saw to that. He headed for the door. I'll be in the car, don't take long. After Thomas left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Amanda sat on my sofa in her wedding dress, looking suddenly young and lost. He's really angry, she finally said, stating the obvious. Yes, he is, I agreed. Not about your ruined wedding day, but about the impression it made on people he's trying to impress. That should tell you something important. Amanda's shoulders slumped. Everything's such a mess. Yes, it is, I said, sitting beside her, but not touching her. Actions have consequences, Amanda. Mine today certainly did. But so do yours. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, sounding like the little girl who used to come to me with skinned knees and broken toys, expecting me to fix everything. That's for you to figure out, I replied gently but firmly. I can't tell you what to do anymore. I can only tell you that I'm establishing boundaries in our relationship from this point forward. I will always love you, but I won't be used or disrespected. Not by you, not by Thomas, not by his family. Amanda wiped at her tears, smearing her makeup further. I never meant to hurt you. I think you did, I contradicted her softly. Maybe not maliciously, but you knew excluding your mother from your wedding preparations while accepting her money would be hurtful. You chose to do it anyway because it suited your purposes and Thomas's wishes. She didn't deny it, which was something, at least. I should go, she said after another long silence. Thomas is waiting. As she stood to leave, I remained seated. Amanda, whatever happens next, I want you to know I do love you. That hasn't changed, but our relationship needs to change if it's going to survive. She paused at the door, not quite looking back. I'll call you tomorrow, she said, though we both knew it wasn't certain that she would. After she left, I finally changed out of the mauve dress I had never wanted, hanging it in the back of my closet where I wouldn't have to see it. The house felt emptier than it had in years, but also somehow lighter, as if a burden I had been carrying, without realizing it, had finally been set down. Over the next few days, I fielded calls from mutual friends and family members who had attended the wedding, each with questions about what had happened. I answered truthfully but without malice, explaining that there had been a misunderstanding about my role in the wedding that led to changes in the services provided. Most expressed shock when they learned I had been excluded from the bridal preparations, despite funding the entire event. Amanda stayed with a friend after the wedding, not returning to the apartment she shared with Thomas. She called as promised the day after our conversation, brief and strained. 3 days later, she called again, this time to tell me that Thomas had suggested they take a break while he focused on repairing relationships with his father's business associates. He blames me for not keeping you under control, she said, her voice hollow. as if I've ever been able to make you do anything you didn't want to do. Is that how he sees family relationships? I asked. In terms of control? There was a long pause before Amanda answered. I'm starting to see a lot of things more clearly now. It was a small step toward awareness, but an important one. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a flicker of hope for my daughter's future, whether that included Thomas or not. 3 months passed with minimal contact between Amanda and me. Through mutual friends, I learned that she and Thomas were officially separated, their brief marriage unable to withstand the strain of the wedding day disaster and its aftermath. Amanda had moved into a small apartment and returned to her job at the advertising agency, while Thomas had relocated to another city for a position in his father's company. During those months, I focused on healing and rebuilding. The financial damage was significant, approximately $30,000 that would delay my retirement by several years. But the emotional healing proved more challenging and more rewarding. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Reynolds, who helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns that had developed in my relationship with Amanda. My overwhelming desire to give her everything had enabled her sense of entitlement. My reluctance to establish boundaries had taught her that she could treat me poorly without consequences. Loving someone doesn't mean being a doormat. Dr. Reynolds reminded me during one particularly difficult session. Real love includes respect, which is a two-way street. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected, while focusing exclusively on Amanda and her wedding. Susan, who had initially informed me about the bridal shower I wasn't invited to, became a regular companion for coffee and movies. My co-workers at the hospital, who had covered shifts, so I could attend wedding planning events, welcomed me back into their social circle without judgment. Gradually, I rebuilt a life that wasn't centered solely around my identity as Amanda's mother. I joined a book club, took a photography class, and even began dating casually for the first time since Jack died. Each small step away from codependency felt both terrifying and liberating. Then on a rainy Tuesday in October, a letter arrived from Amanda. Unlike our brief, awkward phone conversations over the previous months, the letter was 5 pages long, handwritten in the careful script I recognized from thank you notes I had insisted she write as a child. Dear Mom, it began. I've written this letter a dozen times in my head, and no version seems adequate to address what happened between us. But I need to try because the silence is worse than any difficult truth. Amanda wrote about her relationship with Thomas, how his subtle criticism and control had gradually eroded her confidence and separated her from people who truly cared about her. She described the ways his parents had influenced her thinking, suggesting that my practical middle-class values were embarrassing and needed to be hidden away. I wanted so badly to be accepted by them, she wrote, that I betrayed the one person who had always accepted me unconditionally. She detailed the aftermath of the wedding, how Thomas had blamed her entirely for what happened, refusing to acknowledge his part in excluding me, how his parents had used the incident to suggest she wasn't quality enough for their son, how the collapse of her marriage had forced her to examine the values and behaviors that had led her to that point. The hardest part to admit, Amanda wrote near the end, is that I knew what we were doing was wrong. I knew hurting you was wrong. I chose to do it anyway because it seemed easier than standing up to Thomas and his family. I'm deeply ashamed of that choice, and while I don't expect forgiveness, I need you to know that I understand what I did and take full responsibility for it. The letter concluded with a request to meet in person if I was willing. No expectations, just an opportunity to talk face-to-face for the first time since the confrontation after the wedding. A week later, we met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. Amanda arrived first, and I spotted her through the window, nervously shredding a napkin as she waited. She looked both familiar and different, thinner perhaps, with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. When she saw me enter, she stood awkwardly uncertain whether to hug me or maintain distance. I made the decision for her, opening my arms for a brief, somewhat stiff embrace before we both sat down. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "Thank you for your letter," I replied. "It couldn't have been easy to write." Amanda nodded, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. "Nothing about these last few months has been easy, but necessary, I think." We talked for hours, moving beyond the superficial conversations we'd had by phone. Amanda shared more details about her separation from Thomas, how his true character had emerged clearly once the wedding was over, and appearances no longer needed to be maintained. "He never loved me," she said, without self-pity. "He loved the idea of me, the presentable wife who would help his career and social standing. When that was damaged by what happened at the wedding, I became a liability rather than an asset." "I'm sorry," I said, genuinely meaning it. "That must have been painful to realize." "It was," she admitted, "but not as painful as realizing how I'd treated you. Mom, when I saw what Thomas and his family were really like once they didn't need something from me, I couldn't help seeing myself the same way. I'd become just like them." It was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. We didn't gloss over the hurt or pretend it hadn't happened. Instead, we acknowledged it, fully examining how we had each contributed to the breakdown of our relationship and what needed to change for healing to occur. "I can't fix the financial damage," Amanda said toward the end of our meeting, "at least not immediately. But I want you to know I plan to repay you however long it takes." The money was never the real issue, I told her. It was what it represented, the lack of respect and appreciation behind it. "I understand that now," she said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time, "and I'm going to work to earn back your trust without expectations or demands." As we prepared to leave, Amanda hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Why did you do it? Cancel everything at the last minute like that? You must have known it would create a huge scene." I considered her question carefully before answering. "For most of your life, I taught you through my actions that you could treat me however you wanted without consequences, that my love meant I would tolerate anything. That wasn't healthy for either of us. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is allow their child to experience the natural results of their choices." Amanda nodded slowly. "It was a hard lesson, but I needed it." Our relationship didn't heal overnight. Trust once broken takes time and consistent effort to rebuild. But over the following months, we established a new foundation based on mutual respect rather than dependency. Amanda remained true to her word, working to make financial restitution in small, consistent payments that represented her commitment more than the actual money. More importantly, she worked on herself, attending therapy and examining the patterns that had led her to value appearance over substance status, over genuine connection. Without Thomas's influence, the daughter I had raised began to reemerge wiser now and more aware of her own strengths and weaknesses. As for me, I continued my own journey of growth. I learned that loving my daughter didn't mean sacrificing my self-respect or financial security. I discovered that establishing healthy boundaries actually strengthened our relationship rather than damaging it, and I found that my identity extended far beyond being Amanda's mother, important as that role remained. A year after the wedding, that wasn't Amanda and I celebrated my 63rd birthday together. As we shared dessert, she raised her glass in a toast. "To hard lessons and second chances," she said, her eyes clear and present, in a way they hadn't been during the months of wedding planning. "And to valuing those who truly value us in return," I added, clinking my glass against hers. That perhaps was the most profound lesson from our painful experience. True relationships aren't built on what we can provide or how we make others look. They're built on mutual respect, honesty, and the courage to be authentic even when it's difficult. Sometimes it takes a dramatic rupture to clear away false foundations and begin building something genuine and lasting. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to preserve your self-respect even when it hurt someone you love, or experienced a relationship that improved after establishing better boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear this message. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that it's never too late to stand up for yourself with both strength and love.